Welcome to The Faithful Steward. This is a podcast all about sharing biblical wisdom and practical insights in order to help church leaders pursue and teach financial freedom as part of Christian discipleship. We believe this is a spiritual conversation, and this is a place where the church needs to lead the way in order to move our communities forward in how we steward God's resources. I'm your host, James Lenhoff, and I am so passionate about this conversation and helping leaders have the confidence to step into it. We believe that if we help people thrive financially and grow spiritually, it changes everything. And I am so excited to join you on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by Good Sense. If you'd like more information about what we're up to, you can go to our website at goodsensemovement.org. All right, let's get started with today's conversation. Today, I am really excited to kick off a two-part series where we're going to talk about how to approach financial setbacks. We're all going to face moments in our journey towards faithful stewardship where we have fallen on our face, where we've had mistakes that we've made, or even things that were entirely out of our control that are doing damage to our current financial situation. And so often, we want to start immediately into the practical in that conversation. What do we do? How do we react? What is the order of events that gets us back on track and make sure that we stay secure financially? And one of the things I want to do right out of the gate, the reason why this is a two-part conversation is because we tend to skip part one. Part one is the spiritual conversation. It's the work that we need to do to understand what our brain tends to do, what our heart tends to do when we face these setbacks. It's recognizing how quickly we will move back into an ownership mindset, how quickly we will completely forget the stewardship disciplines that we've learned when we're in a panic. And so we've got to start by reminding ourselves of the spiritual situation that we're in before we go straight to the practical. And so come back next week and we're going to talk the practical. If you currently are facing a financial setback, if you've been hit with something unexpected, and you are really anxious to get the practical advice of how to get back on track, we are going to talk about that next week. But this conversation is actually more important, in my opinion, because if we lose sight of faithful stewardship in these panic moments, in these seasons where things aren't going well, we have the potential to uproot a whole lot more than just our spending plan or our net worth. We have the potential to uproot our very identity, our understanding of our role that we play in managing and stewarding God's resources. And that can actually do more lasting damage than some unforeseen medical bill or a car repair that we didn't expect, or a HVAC system going out in our house. Like, those are all things that will certainly set us back. But if we let them take away the ground that we have gained in faithful stewardship, recovering financially is actually not the more important part of this work. So today, I want to unpack for us how we approach these setbacks and also how we lead others who might be facing these setbacks. If you're in a leadership position in your community and you have people coming to you and asking you questions around these types of setbacks, we want to start with the spiritual conversation rather than running straight into the practical pieces. And so let's just paint a scenario. If you're in a situation where you had a medical expense that you didn't expect and it took away your emergency fund and then some, you've actually had to borrow some more money on either a credit card or you're spending money that you didn't expect to spend, and now you feel like you've fallen back in your progress. What we first and foremost need to recognize is this is going to happen. Progress is not a straight line. It's many times a very confusing, twisty, bouncy process that is really frustrating emotionally, because we'll feel like we're taking 2 steps forward and then we'll end up taking 3 steps back. And loses our momentum. We feel like we are somehow failing because we'll tend to catastrophize. We'll take something that is a short-term, immediate pain, and we'll then trend it. We'll say, this is the way it's always going to be now. This blows everything up. I'm ruined. And we'll get into this mindset that is one of deep anxiety, one that is really focused on ourselves, the cost of what this means for me, rather than recognizing all of these are God's resources, and He has more than enough to backfill, to overcome, to bring restoration to things that have been destroyed by this event that might have happened. He is the giver of all good things. There is enough in the storehouses. But we will start a lot of times by turning inward, getting really self-focused in the way that we react to these moments. And so if you lose your job, or your car requires a whole transmission rebuild, or something big breaks in your financial picture, first and foremost, we need to make sure that we are staying present and we are recognizing our role to play in this season. These seasons will absolutely come. We need to be prepared for when they come to know how to stay steady in our faithful stewardship. And the most important part of that to begin with is to expect them. It's to recognize that this is part of the equation. You know, in Romans, Paul tells us, I consider that our present suffering is not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. The assumption is that we will have suffering, we will have challenges, things will be hard. And if we don't assume that, if we just walk through life assuming that progress will always be a straight line, that will always move up and to the right, then we will be devastated when it doesn't. But if we expect that it won't, it sets us up for a much healthier perspective. And that's really what we're talking about at the outset here, is maintaining an eternal perspective, that this is a season that we're facing right now, but it is not our permanent situation. If we take the fact that we've lost our emergency fund because an emergency happened, well, that's what you saved it for. If we are in a situation where that medical bill is costing us a lot and it's taking some of our cash flow away, we will perpetualize that. We'll say that we're never going to be able to enjoy ourselves again. We're never going to be able to take another vacation. We're never going to be able to, meet some of these goals. Those thoughts of I'm never going to, or I can't, or now, this costs me everything. Those are the kinds of thoughts that shrink our perspective, and our focus gets so selfish. We need to maintain an eternal perspective that recognizes the seasonality of life. Life is a series of seasons by design. God takes us into these seasons for a purpose. And that really leads us to our second point. If we maintain eternal perspective and we recognize that we are faithful stewards in the midst of the tension and the struggle, then we can hold on to hope. I believe that things don't just happen to us, they also happen for us. Our God is always for us. And the way that I picture some of these struggles as I've faced them in my own life is that God is holding out in his open hand something for me. In the struggle, in the hard seasons, I have grown more than I have ever grown in a season of plenty and ease. And so when I run into another season where there is pain and there is difficulty, if I can maintain that permanent vision of eternal perspective, then I can ask him, what do you have for me in this? You're always for me. And so that doesn't mean this is easy. That doesn't mean that we're going to paint sunshine on it and call it fun. It's hard, but it's still for me. And if God is holding something in his open hand in the midst of that season of growth and struggle, I want it. I want what he has for me. And so I can hold tight to the hope that he is for me, even in the season that feels against me. Things aren't just happening to me, they're happening for me. And I can lean into that and try to gain what God wants to give me through the struggle and the pain, rather than just resenting the struggle and the pain and feeling like life is unfair. Again, in Romans, Paul tells us that we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. This is the process that the struggle and the suffering produces character and perseverance and hope. This is how we actually grow. And so holding that eternal perspective also allows us to hold tight to hope that comes through the struggle. We need to fight hard against the tendency to catastrophize things and make them mean something that they don't mean. And that's what allows us to stay connected to joy. And this is not Pollyannish or naive. This is true, that we can actually stay connected to joy, not necessarily happiness. Those are very different. When we are in a season of difficulty and pain, when something has blindsided us and set us back, it is really hard to tap into happiness. I think happiness is a very fleeting experience where joy can last. Joy can endure even in those difficult seasons, as long as we're connected to that hope. We can actually find the connection to joy even while we're in the struggle and the suffering, because we are connected to the source of that joy. This is why the spiritual aspect of the conversation is so important. Because if we don't talk about this stuff first, if we don't connect ourselves to eternal perspective and hold tight to hope and allow ourselves to find joy, if we just move straight to the practical, all of those practical steps that we take will be motivated to make ourselves feel better, to give ourselves rescue from the pain, to avoid the struggle and the difficulty. It's all about, how do I just get out of this so that I don't have to go through it? Where when we maintain our spiritual perspective, going through it allows us to grow in a way that then lets us share what we've learned with others. And that's the beautiful gift that we can give. When we have experienced these difficult seasons, it humbles us, it connects us, it makes us more human. We can relate to others who are in those seasons more effectively, because we can say, I've been there before and there's hope. I've been there before and it's a season. It is not forever. We can share those things from our experiences if we endure them and maintain this spiritual connection. We can be in community where we're talking about these things more readily. Where if we just rush to the practical, if we just focus on getting the debt paid down or making the cash flow crunch go away, and we fix it without growing spiritually through it, then we don't have much to share other than practical experience. We don't get the ability to relate to someone else who's in pain. By connecting our shared pain, our shared experience, and walking through the spiritual ramifications of it, encouraging them that there is growth in this, giving them the hope that we gained through our own experience of the same thing. We don't want to blow past that. I think more often than not, that's why God is taking us through it, is so that we can give it away to others who are in similar situations. We want to choose to persevere in our spiritual growth through these struggles that will absolutely come our way. And we want to then choose to do these things together, to walk these things in community, Invite others into the struggles that you're facing. And I want to argue, particularly if you are leading, if you are in a leadership position, one of the most powerful and profound ways that you can lead is by allowing others to see your pain and your struggle. Don't hide it. Don't stuff it. Don't ignore it. Invite your community into it. We were never meant to face pain and suffering alone. We were never meant to face setbacks and failure and brokenness in isolation. That's not the design. The design is community. It's restoration and healing and reinforcement of truth through community. And that's only available if we allow community into our experience of pain and suffering and struggle. It's in these seasons that we actually are formed. It's in these seasons that we actually grow in our ability to not run to an ownership mindset, to not grab and hoard and over-secure ourselves. It's in these seasons that we actually learn just how amazing and abundant our provider is. And we recognize his ownership of all of this stuff. And that's what allows us then to teach others to do the same. So don't bypass the first part of this conversation. If you or someone you know are in a season of struggle, you've lost income, you've had a massive expense that hit you and blindsided you, don't just go about fixing it. Sit in it for a second and ask the owner of all of these resources what he's trying to teach you in it, so that you can teach others what he's teaching you. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Faithful Steward podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and other information that we mentioned in today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our website at goodsensemovement.org to get all the resources we offer churches to help equip them in teaching financial stewardship to their community. If you have any questions or any topics you want to make sure we cover on our show, you can email me at jameslenhoff@goodsensemovement.org. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you all have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.